Welcome to Real Estate Investing for Professional Men and Women, the podcast that guides professionals to financial prosperity. Join our community and let's start building your wealth. Here's your host, Gary Wilson.
Hello, everyone. This is Gary Wilson, and welcome to this week's version of Real Estate Investing for Professional Men and Women. So welcome aboard. I appreciate you participating in the podcast. If you haven't subscribed yet, obviously you can go to any one of 75 different channels. The most popular, of course, are iTunes, iHeart Radio. Pick the one that you like and subscribe there. And be willing to comment and share and network, because the reason is almost all of us here, we're all professionals in what we do. My background is in banking. Okay, got a degree in computer science. Most of the people we deal with are professionals too. You're a chiropractor, you're a dentist, you're an engineer, you're a pilot. Okay, often you already own a business. I know a lot of pilots that do side businesses because that's fun for them. But let's say you own your own business, or you have your own practice. Generally speaking, people in this genre, what we found out is we make great investors because we're not doing it like we took some late night guru program and we're trying to do this on the side and if it works, that's great. Now this is intentional. We're actually doing this with purpose in mind. We invest honorably and ethically in our areas near where we live, not specifically where we live, but we improve the areas we invest in, because when we do that, everybody wins. The renters win, the community wins, we win as investors. Okay, we know that we can leverage our businesses when it's structured properly to pull out cash to build another business to own the real estate. It's just that business acumen is what leads you to be more successful, and that's who we are. And I welcome you aboard. A couple of quick things. Obviously we have a community, and the good news is in a community we have what we call investor agents. These are agents we train to work with us. I've been in investing for 33 years. I've been a broker for 17 years. I built the brokerage company specifically to work with investors because that's who I was. And I trained all the agents to do the same thing. And now we've got a global program where I've trained literally over 20,000 agents all across the U.S. and Canada, even the Bahamas, by the way, to work with you and I. So if you want to be part of that community, just go to myinvestmentservices.com. You can see whatever link you got to click on, sign up. There's different levels you can join. Very affordable. Almost some of them it's like dirt cheap, like $1 a day. But it gives you access to the resources you need, the tools, the techniques, and the people like the investor agent. So, anyway, speaking of investor agents, I've got one today as a guest on a podcast. His name's Diego Corzo, and if you recognize his name, it's for a good reason. I'll let Diego explain that. But Diego is a friend of mine. He's also part of one of my mastermind groups. I participate in multiple masterminds. The main one is called GoBundance. Healthy, wealthy, generous men who seek to lead active lives, and we're pretty serious about that. Okay, so Diego, welcome aboard, man. Glad to have you.
Thank you very much, Gary. Very happy to be here.
How things down in sunny, warm Austin, Texas?
Man, right now the weather has been crazy. Yesterday you could walk with like just a shirt on and shorts, and now you have to put on a jacket or two. So it fluctuates. It's crazy.
Yeah, well, that just makes us appreciate the sun even more when the sun does come out, right?
100%.
So, hey, Diego, if you could, before we get into a lot of the meat and potatoes about investing in the Austin area, if you wouldn't mind, share a little bit about yourself. Some people may already know your name for good reason. Others who don't, just tell a little bit about who is Diego, because I want them to connect with you. So when we talk about the investing, your experience will make a lot more sense. And I appreciate you, if you don't mind doing that, I appreciate you doing that too, by the way.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm 28 years old. I'll just share where I am right now. So I'm 28 years old. I own 18 doors, some in Florida, in Tennessee, and some in Austin, which is where I live. I've been doing real estate as a realtor full-time since 2014. And I bought my first property when I was 23, 24 years old. I started with the strategy called house hacking, which is basically where you buy a home or a multifamily, you rent out the sites or live with roommates, and then and you are able to buy a home with low money down. So that's how I got started. I came to Austin to work as a software developer for GM, and soon after being there for a year, I was like, okay, I need to do something else. And that's what got me into being a realtor. But originally, I am a dreamer. I am a DACA recipient. So that right now is 2019, and right now that's a hot topic on the news. And so basically, I was born in Lima, Peru, and I came to the U.S. when I was 9 years old with my parents. They overstayed their visas, and then I found myself undocumented. So I am still a dreamer, a DACA recipient, and there's been a lot of challenges. Like I couldn't get a driver's license until I was 23 years old. I couldn't. I At the age of 16, that's when I found out I couldn't drive. Then at the age of 18, I found out I couldn't get student loans or any financial aid for my college. And then at that time, I also find out I couldn't legally work. So I just created my own company, and that's how I was able to pay for college. And then later, I was able to get a work permit and a driver's license. But for me, what got me into the investing mentality was I was 21 years old when I read the book Rich Dad Poor Dad.
Mm-hmm.
And that book changed my mindset, and it taught me that there's two ways to make money. You can either trade your time for money, or you can make your money work for you.
Mm-hmm.
So since then, since I was 21, I'm like, okay, no matter what happens, I know what I have to do to build wealth. I just need to make my money work for me. So I got a job in working as a software developer with GM, and it was great. And starting early as a young person, I decided to just live below my means to be able to invest the rest. And that's what happened. And now, fast forward 5 years, 6 years later, now I own all these properties, and it's been great.
I appreciate you sharing that. And what's interesting is, in life, we all, like I was born in Germany, right? Lived in the States since I was 4 years old. But what people don't recognize now is, and I'll just mention this and then we can move on, because there's a lot of confusion out there. And I appreciate you sharing that part of your personal stories. Is that it's not that there's a process and you're ignoring it. The fact is, for your particular situation, I want people to understand this. This is what you're not getting on the news: is there actually is no process, and that's what we need to figure out as a country, as a civilization, as a society, a culture. Instead of fighting like that, just why I don't watch the news, guys. You're going to either get this view or that view. Neither one's completely accurate or correct. There's truths out there, and Diego's living one of those truths. And that one of the truths is we need to have a process for Diego, because he's a great guy. I know him personally, and I can tell you he's kicking some serious butt. And it brings me back to, my ancestors came over here. We didn't have everything. They didn't have everything available to them that we have available to us. But they rolled up their sleeves, got busy, and in spite of their adversity and their obstacles, they persevered and succeeded. And that's why I like you, because you're doing the exact same thing today in 2019. You're living that dream that's been alive in America for hundreds of years. And so I appreciate you sharing that. And here you are now. You've got some corporate experience. You put yourself through college. You're a realtor. You serve other clients, and you're doing your own investing. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit about that. So tell us a little bit about what you're doing, and I want you to think of it from two views, Diego, if you don't mind. One view is Diego is the investor, and the other one is Diego is the realtor representing investors. So think about it. It's like the same skills, the same technical skills of like analysis and due diligence and all that, powers of observation, but how you apply it. Like you can serve investors and help them be successful too, while you're making more success for yourself. So if you don't mind, describe a little bit about that and about what you're doing, because this is going to really tie people to you, and maybe perhaps want to come down and do some investing in Austin too.
Yeah, and I would say the two perspectives is definitely a great segue, just because I've been in both sides, right? I've been the realtor that has helped other investors, but I also invest in myself, like with either other investors or just by myself in Austin, and in other areas. So one of the things that I like to share and that I invest in is I invest for cash flow. I don't like to invest for just appreciation and have
Mhm.
a property that's losing $100 a month or $200 a month in the hopes that it appreciates,
Mhm.
just because that's more gambling to me,
Right.
right? But as an investor, if you focus on some cash flow, it all depends also what stage you are in life, right? If you're a millennial, if you're just getting started, you can risk a little bit more. But for some people that have been working for like 20 years, 30 years, and they want to put their money to work, it's good to at least break even or have some cash flow. And that has been a couple of my clients here in Austin as an example. There's very little cash flow in Austin. So it's hard to speak with like a brand new investor that says,
Mhm.
hey, I want to invest in Austin and follow the 1% rule, right? So the
Right.
1% rule, if you buy a house that's 100,000, you want the rent to be $1,000 a month.
Right.
That, unfortunately, in Austin doesn't exist anymore. But what it does exist is there's a lot of appreciation, and it's not just because I'm a realtor, but in Austin we have a unique market because even though prices have gone up and up and up and up and up since like 2012,
Mhm.
I don't see it for a little while even slowing down because there's still a lot of companies coming here. And
Right.
these companies are hiring people that don't just make 60K or 80K, but their starting salaries are like 120, um, which is great because you know that those companies also do their own research as to what cities are going to be booming, right? So
Mhm.
right now, I would recommend for some people to, if there's an area where like Austin is booming, there's also going to be other areas in the outskirts. So I recommend investing a little bit in the outskirts where people are willing to drive that like 20, 30, 40 minutes, um, just to be able to buy a home where prices are going to be continuing to appreciate.
Right.
Um, and really, for example, I helped a lawyer last year, and he said, "Diego, just find me a property that makes me $100 a month, or like around there, and I'll be happy." Because he just wanted to park some of his money. You know, he
Right.
read the book by Osborne, Wealth Can Wait, who he's a friend of ours, and he reached out to Osborne, and Osborne recommended me. So I met up with him and we put his money to work, right? But it's unique depending on where you are. If you're a millennial, I will say house hacking will be the best way to get started because you have some time to wait. You can live with roommates or live with tenants and make that money work for you that way and continue to repeat the process. Um, but I have done both. I have done the house hacking, and I've also bought investing more for long term.
Yeah.
Yeah, and not just here in Austin, but for example, in Jacksonville, where I'm buying some homes, they're in C minus areas, C
Right.
areas, so they're not really nice properties, but they do cash flow,
Right.
and it does give me at least a little bit of a cushion where like, okay, I know I'm just going to keep it for 2 years and then I'm going to sell it. And fortunately, Jacksonville has appreciated a lot.
Yeah.
um, the reason is because before there were a lot of investors that were wanting to get for like, I need to get my 12 to 15% cash on cash return. And now there's a lot more funds that are going in there and they're buying properties that they're okay with 7 to 8% cash on cash.
Yeah.
So homes have appreciated in that perspective. And right now I'm actually going to be selling a couple of properties in Jacksonville and see what I do next.
Cool. Okay. Well, I appreciate that. What's interesting is, on the platform we have, it's on myinvestmentservices.com. There's different levels, but to get to this level I'm describing here, you have to subscribe to it. But there's different websites and there are links and databases we provide. You allow you to research anything you want on any person or any property, pretty much anywhere. And so we know all the tier 1 cities, the tier 2 cities, the tier 3 cities. And right now, we're really big on the tier 3 cities. Tier 2 would be like Jacksonville, Florida. tier 3 would be, Fort Wayne, Indiana, Lafayette, Indiana, or, just places like that. Well, the thing is, it's a lot less competition there. And we've now got agents that we've trained to keep working there. There's almost in all over 600 cities and towns just in the U.S. and 3 Canadian provinces,
Oh, wow.
British Columbia, Quebec, and Ontario, of course. So in any case, nobody's paying attention to those tier 3 cities, and yet the cap rates are so much better, and you don't have as much competition. It's just, so we're really hot on those. I like the tier 2 cities too, because you also get more appreciation. Tier 1 is tough. LA's tier 1, Chicago, New York, Vancouver, they're all tier 1. And so what happens is it's so expensive. You can still cash flow. You just have to put more money down, or you extend your term or lower the rate. There's different things you can do creatively to invest in those areas. But people that invest in those areas are generally doing what you described earlier, which is more speculative. I know people who invested with negative cash flow, but they're banking on that appreciation over the next 5 years. And usually it works out pretty good, but you just don't know when the economy is going to head for a correction. In fact, we're in a correction now.
Yeah.
We don't know how long it's going to be or how deep. We just don't know. If we did, we'd all be gajillionaires, right? But knowing what we know means we prepare for that. We play offense and defense. So if you wouldn't mind to talk a little bit about, I know you're still relatively young, you're getting started, but you got 18 doors, man, that's awesome. You've probably already figured you got to play offense and some defense. So as far as like strategies and tactics, like how you're doing some of this, describe maybe one of your rentals, for example, and some of the steps you went through, and maybe some tools you used if you have any particular tools. Because I want people to listen to this to realize that all this stuff's available. You just need guidance typically, and always tactics and strategies, but guidance really helps. But would you mind sharing a little bit about that, Diego? A little bit about some of the strategies and tactics and tools and things like that?
Yeah, for sure. So one of the things is I'll share one in Austin. I'll share the one house hacking that I did, and then I'll share one that I did in Jacksonville, just so that you guys know the different ways that I used to invest and diversify in this from this part. So I realized that in Austin, there were a lot of young professionals coming in here. So I decided to buy a 4-bedroom home with putting 5% down. So with less than 10K, I bought a house that was 175 in Pflugerville, in the outskirts of North Austin. And my mortgage at that time was like $1,350. And then I rented out each room for $600. So I was making $1,800 gross, paying my mortgage, putting a little bit of towards expenses like other expenses, some repairs. And then what I did is then I just began to save a lot more of that money. And that allowed me to put my money to work for other properties. Now, the one thing that I did is with the roommates that were coming in as a realtor, because I was also a realtor back then, if they wanted to do the same thing that I was doing, then I would help them out as well. So that is one thing. Now, the other thing is that by investing in an area where there's a lot of young professionals, you can house hack again and get another owner occupant loan in the year or every 2 years. So this allows you to start investing in real estate with low money down multiple times, where in like the next 5-6 years, you can own 3 to 4 properties without a problem.
Yeah.
So that's one strategy. And then the other strategy that I did is I found a wholesaler in Jacksonville, Florida. It happens to be my brother, but that also helps, right? But there's a wholesalers in other areas. And I knew that, for example, in Austin, cash flow was getting low. And my whole thing for me, because of my situation with immigration and stuff like that, I didn't have time to invest and hope that homes will appreciate. I just wanted straight up cash flow. So I found that I can buy houses in Florida and Jacksonville for like 40K or 30K cash, and they would rent for like 650 or 700. So I decided to invest over there. We had a property management in place over there, so that really helped. My brother was the one that walked the properties for me, but if you have a real estate agent or something that they can walk the properties, if you cannot make it out there, I would highly recommend that. Do inspections, of course, and then the property manager will put the tenant in place. Okay. Some of the things that I've learned is that it depends. If the property management company, like if you're buying the house with already a property management in place and a tenant, that sometimes is a lot better, but you want to make sure that you look at all the rent history and any of the repair history, because they will have it. If you're buying a house from like the landlord that is just wants to retire, he has 8 properties and the tenants that sometimes they don't pay or things like that, then you might want to get rid of that tenant once the lease expires. Yeah. And let the property management company put the new tenant in place. That would be what I would recommend. Yeah. And then here in Austin, for example, for my house hacks, I've been able, one of the things, just because Austin, it's harder to cash flow again. Yeah. There's been some investors that found, for example, a property management company that will rent out a 4-bedroom house by the rooms. So this means that if a house to a family would rent for $1,700 and you can rent out 4 rooms for $600 plus utilities, now you have a gross of $2,400. So it gives you more cash flow. And that is one strategy that I think can definitely help. Now, property managers may charge 12% rather than the 8 or 10% or even less, but it's totally doable to find something like this and just to maximize the profits. I've been able to help a lot of millennials do that here in Austin. Yeah. And I even have like a group called House Hacking Club. And there's like a Facebook group with like 350 people all over the US. And we just talk about house hacking and different ways to invest that way. But I feel like if you can so one of the things for me being young, I also didn't have enough capital, right? So I just have to get resourceful and figure out, okay, would it be better for me to take 2 to 3 years to save $40K to buy a property here in Austin, like put 20% down? Or would it be better for me to find 2 of my friends, to find 2 other investors, to each save 10K or 12K and then start investing that way? Right. So a lot of the properties that I have are either owned by myself or with other partners. And with other partners, you have to, of course, your LLC and have everything in place. I've learned a lot of stuff just by mistakes that I have made, right? But there's definitely a lot of potential in partnering up with people so that you can get started faster and trying to learn the real estate business, because there's a lot of people that, because of fear, or they just say, hey, I need to save 60K. It might take them 3 years, 4 years to save that money. And by the time that they're doing that, I have already bought so many doors, right? By strategically partnering up with people. So I would always recommend different ways to invest, not just your own money.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you sharing that. A couple of key points is, we're most of us in our group are getting more creative too. Obviously, like Airbnb is an option in most places, but also what we call non-medical assisted living. It's sort of like a, parallel to what you were doing with house hacking, is there's people who are emerging retirees. They don't need medically assisted living, yet they don't want to keep their own homes because they don't want to cut grass anymore. They don't want to fix things. They don't want to shovel snow, that kind of stuff. But yet they want to be around other people in a home environment, and they're mobile. They're ambulatory. They like to go hiking and stuff like that. So we can rent those rooms out for $1,000 a piece, each room, and take a house that may have rented for $2,000 a month. All of a sudden, now we're getting $8,000 or $10,000 a month for it. Just amazing. There's all kinds of possibilities. Wherever there's an obstacle, there's always an opportunity. And the way you see them is, if you can't see them yourself, just hang around other people who are doing this stuff, and all of a sudden you'll get all these holy smokes. I never thought about that. That one idea just made me $100,000 a year, whatever.
Yeah.
The other thing you mentioned too was kind of interesting. I was watching your body language when you talked about making mistakes. You smiled, and I really appreciate that, because what I want to emphasize to people is this: is people who are successful, we recognize we're not going to get it right every time. We're going to make mistakes. The reason we smile is not because we're callous or we're like flippant. It's because we're humble. Mistakes make us humble. Mistakes make us learn. All a mistake is that we attempted something we know will work. We see it working all the time. We just missed something, or we did something wrong. And all we got to do is learn from that, and we'll do better the next time. That's why we smile, because it's a humbling thing, and we know we're going to be a better person as a result. In fact, if I wrote a book, Diego, and all the mistakes I made, it'd be bigger than all the successes. The good news is all the successes I had far outweighed the mistakes.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, in any case, this is really good stuff, and I want to keep going. So, all right, we know you're in Austin. We know you invested in Jacksonville, so it kind of gives us an idea about the where you're investing. But as far as time frame, talk a little bit about that, because in 2014, most parts of the country had already come out of the recession and they're into recovery. Some of them fast, like Phoenix, for example. 2014, Phoenix was shooting out of like it was shot out of a rocket. I'm in Southern California right now. I'm in Laguna Beach. Back in 2013, things have started growing appreciation-wise 15% annualized already. So talk a bit about timing. And I want to emphasize something here. I learned a lot from being in this for 33 years. So what I learned was, I used to say in the old days, well, I'll just wait till the economy drops and I'll invest, but we can't ever always figure that out. And it's like you're speculating, and that's like gambling. What I figured out was always be in the game, because there's always a way to invest. So, but I still want to go back to timing though. If you could talk a bit about that between 2014 and 2019. Here we are. We know the real estate market is starting to pull back. We see inventory on their increase. Days on market on the increase, and the drops in volume in most places of the country. But how's timing affected you, or what have you done in relative to the timing in those last 5 or 6 years?
Yeah, and that is definitely like I totally see what you're saying, because the importance of timing, right? And I grew up in 2008, when the market crashed. I was 18 years old, 17 years old, and I lived in Florida. So I saw everything. And my mom decided to buy a house for like $320. And I'm like, she should not be buying a house for $320, just because of the way that we were living and stuff like that. But everybody was buying a house. And you can just like, everybody was getting qualified and everything. But then the market crashed and it fell, and the property was worth 150 in like less than a year. Like we're talking 6 months, it crashed.
Yeah.
So I saw that. So I wasn't an investor then, but now that I started investing in 2013, 2014, I have seen it grow. And now I'm being more cautious too about how I'm investing. And similar to what you said, is like, there's other ways to maximize the opportunity. So if the normal conventional way of getting a family doesn't work, you can get a single story home with 5 bedrooms or 4 bedrooms and rent for the assisted living or non-assisted living. Right. The non-assisted living, that's the first time I heard it. And I'm like, this is genius. Like, just because there's ways, right? And you can think and be like, okay, if I rent to students, as an example, right? Uncles, like they're getting, unfortunately, the student debt crisis is going up, right? But there's so many banks giving money to students that sometimes the safest renters are going to be the students, because they either have their parents on the lease, and if not their parents that can cover the rent, it's going to be their scholarships or their student debt. So they're always going to be able to pay. So that's one way to like, okay, if I can get a family, how many students can I pack in that house, right? Of course, with all of the rules that you may have in your HOA and stuff like that. But now with timing, this is the first time that I've experienced personally, like the growth and then the peak and stuff like that.
Right.
So something that I'm doing now is I'm selling if everything goes well, I will be selling 2 single family homes and a duplex in Jacksonville. And now, instead of just putting the money in in the bank, what I'm going to do is I am going to start doing hard money loans or loaning money to flippers or to people that have experience, and just do like 3 month to 6 months loans. So this way, my money's still working, but I have less risk on the timing, right?
Yeah.
So I'm not going to be the person that's going to pull out the cash and put it in a bank account. I feel like there's enough, depending on who you invest with, like who you trust. Unfortunately, with the circles that we have within GoBundance and M1, there's a lot of opportunity out there to see what other investments opportunities are with other flippers. Now, for example, one thing that I'm not an accredited investor yet, so I haven't been able to put down some money for multifamily with other like 100 units or 120 units. That's going to be coming for me next in the next couple of years. But for now, I just want to capitalize on the appreciation that I have created and put that equity to work in more short-term things.
Awesome. I appreciate that. Yeah, good stuff. Good strategy, smart strategies too. So, hey, we're getting close to the end here, but what I want to do, Diego, is if you don't mind, give everybody, and I know it sounds like a cliche question, the why, what's the why behind the why, but it really is important, I think, for people to see that you've got something that drives you. There's something inside you that's driving you forward, like what's pulling you forward. And, not necessarily like what's the why behind it. Because I know when I come up with the why, like for me, I actually go 5 layers deep. I go why, get the answer, then ask why that. It's just like a 2-year-old. You keep asking why because you don't understand. Well, why? I understand that the sun is on this side of my face because the sun comes up on the east in the morning. But why? Why? Well, what do you mean why? Well, why does the sun even come up? So I guess what I'm getting at is what makes you tick, man? What makes you drive? Because I realize when I'm working with people, Diego, if I can find there's something they're passionate about. Like one guy, he used to race these desert buggies and races in Northern California, and he still talks about it. He's in his 70s. He still talks about it every time I talk to him, like he's still doing it. And I said, why don't you build a group of investors around that one genre? Because I guarantee you, in that group of people that like their race cars fast, guaranteed there are going to be some high D driver type personalities that own their own businesses that love to invest in real estate. All of a sudden, voila, he's now making more than he needs to make. So amazing when you discover that about yourself. So if you don't mind, share a little bit. I know it's a little bit personal, but people will see a little bit of you in them, and that might be what they need, Diego, to take this next step.
Yeah. So interestingly enough, 2 weeks ago, I gave a TEDx speech, and the why for me that I shared there was like, sure, I am called a dreamer, and like I'm a dreamer, immigrant, undocumented, whatever you want to call it. But at the end of the day, we are being called that because we were the kids that were brought here through no fault of our own. But I like to say that the original dreamers were my parents. So they were the ones that sacrificed, that left everything they had in Peru to come here. And my dad told me that the U.S. is the land of opportunity, but it is up to us to find it. So that quote that he told me is like, that's always been ingrained in me. And that no matter what kind of obstacle I may have, it's like, there's always a way. The U.S. is the land of opportunity. So there's always a way.
Right.
And for me, that's been the thing that has pushed me. And also seeing the sacrifices that my parents had to go through to get to where we are today. That is always that driver for me, that I'm like, okay, my mom hasn't been able to see her parents and her dad in like 20 years. So it's like, I just want this to be like, no matter what I do, that my life is an honor for them.
Good. Well, I appreciate you sharing that. That's a big deal. And I think you really lead by example, and I hope I can help you. I hope this helps you also personally and get the word out. And for any of you investors out there listening, and you have an interest in Austin, by the way, there's lots of other areas around Austin, guys. You don't have to just invest in just Austin. I mean, to the north, a few hours, you got Abilene, Midland, Lubbock. That's like to the north, east, middle, west. And then to the east, a few hours, you got Houston, which is huge. Of course, lots of people there, but lots of opportunities there. And there's other smaller areas. I mean, I would look up. In fact, Diego, how can people find you if they want to look you up, and perhaps pursue working with you in the Austin area? What's the best way to get a hold of you?
Yeah, for sure. They can send me an email at info@diegocorzo.com. And if they want to learn more about house hacking too, they can go to househackingclub.com, my website, diegocorzo.com. But yeah, I mean, they don't have to just invest in Austin. There's Kyle, there's Buda, Pflugerville, Manor, a lot of stuff in the outskirts that, for example, you have Austin and San Antonio. It's about an hour and 20 minutes away. And there's like 3 cities in between that has a lot of growth, just because somebody that's working can work in San Antonio and also in Austin. Yeah. So there's a lot of potential here.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And for everybody listening, again, if you like this, man, and you haven't subscribed, just go ahead and go to iTunes, iHeartRadio, Stitcher. There's 75 some odd different platforms, channels to go and listen to the podcast. But go to subscribe. And if you want to be part of this community, several thousand strong, over 600 cities and towns across the U.S. and Canada, just go to myinvestorservices.com. Subscribe or whatever you don't. Just do the easy one first, and then get in, get your feet wet, get the tools you need, the strategies, get contact with people like Diego in any town you want. Quite frankly, we've trained people, agents everywhere, and participate. Just show up. Half the formula for success is just showing up, and let the word come to your aid just by being there. So God bless you and your families. We will see you on the next podcast. In the meantime, take care. And years of prosperity, Gary Wilson and Diego Corzo. Thanks, Diego.
Have a good day.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Real Estate Investing for Professional Men and Women. Be sure to go to myinvestmentservices.com to join our community and start building wealth today.